Hey everyone, it's Helen from SMB Deal Hunter. Today we have Gretchen Roberts with us, an entrepreneur who acquired Red Bike Advisors, an accounting tax and advisory firm that's remote first but based in Wilmington, North Carolina. Gretchen acquired the business a little over a year and a half ago, and what's super interesting is Gretchen's background is actually not in accounting, and she is also not a CPA. So very excited to hear Gretchen's story today. Gretchen, it's great to have you on.
Thank you, Helen. It's really good to be here.
Let's start with your background, Gretchen. How did you get into sort of acquisition entrepreneurship? What were you doing before?
Yeah, so right before I was doing that, I was actually working in marketing at a large public company, a tech company. And I did love that overall, but then I just, one day I woke up, it was a couple of years ago, I woke up, I turned 45 and I was kind of journaling and asking myself, what do I want for the next 20 years if you just think about maybe retirement, right? And I knew that in that moment that I did not want to spend the next 20 years, climbing the C-suite ladder at a large public company. The things that go along with that are a lot of travel, a lot of PowerPoints, and a lot of Zoom meetings. And I think that when I really thought about what I wanted, it was to have control of my schedule. So I do work hard and I work a lot, probably more than I should, but I do have control of my time. So yeah, that's kind of what started me in it. And then I obviously went down a rabbit hole by ending up with an accounting firm, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, you were thinking about what you wanted to do next. What were some of the other options you were considering, and how did you even stumble across this world of buying businesses?
Yeah, it does feel like it's something that's kind of risen to the surface and the modern consciousness, so to speak, right? There's a
Yep.
lot of people that are out there talking about it and doing it. There's whole communities around it. And I ended up getting exposed to one of those communities and going, hey, maybe this is what I want to do. Because unlike you, I'm not a 0 to 1 person. I'm more of a step into something that's already built and then put my spin on it and optimize it my way and grow it, right? And again, that probably comes from my background being in corporate America. As a director in corporate America, you have people to do things for you. um, so I knew I wanted to come into something with a team. When I first started looking though, I was all over the place. I just put my marketing skills to work and I started doing cold outreach to not just deal brokers, but also just random business owners within like 5 states of my state, which is Tennessee, and holding calls with them. And I would just tell them I'm an investor, I'm looking at buying a business, I'm interested in yours. And anybody who would get on a call with me, I just got on a call with them. And like, for example, my first call was with a guy who ran a garbage truck route. I found out pretty quickly I did not want that. That's not the kind of business I wanted, but it gave me a lot of exposure to different industries and some things that you never even think of because it's not like something you can find on the NACIS code, just random stuff. And as I held these calls, I probably held like over 100 calls with business sellers.
Wow.
And this was over some time, right? I mean, I wasn't doing them all. I was working full time still, but every time I had one of those calls, I would just think like, what is it about this business that's attractive and what's not? And eventually I ended up with a set of criteria. And one day I realized that accounting firms checked every single box in my criteria. It was kind of a long way around, but I got to what I wanted in the end.
Wow, and that's right. I love the action that you took. I mean, there's so many tire kickers out there that, look at deals all day on a biz by sell, but never actually talk to a single seller or a single broker even in years. So good for you. I guess what was that criteria that you kind of landed on after having these conversations, just getting to know these businesses better?
So this was a little bit after 2020, but I think everybody was still a little gun shy from 2020, right? And so one of them for sure was recession resistant. It's hard to say fast. Recession resistant. I don't think anything's recession proof, but so that's a big thing. And that part of my business, I actually don't love, and neither do our clients. The compliance side, nobody even likes that. But people still can't do their own business taxes. They're really hard.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're struggling. So that was one of them. I wanted to be in an industry where there's a lot of old school stuff going on and there's an opportunity to improve it through technology, efficiency, et cetera. I mean, most accounting firms are run by older baby boomer white men. I mean, honestly, like those are the stats. And a lot of stuff is still on paper. So there's always an opportunity to come into this industry and modernize it. Um, Recurring revenue is a big one too. Not a lot of firms honestly still bill by the form or the hour, but the firm I ended up buying had a lot of recurring revenue already set up, which is awesome. That's great for cash flow, especially if you pre-capture the cost of delivery, which is, that was another attractive thing about it. And then margins on accounting firms are pretty good. I mean, I think the lowest you'd find when it's badly run is 20%.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And where were you looking for these deals? You said you ran some cold outreach. How did you set
Mhm.
that up? Like, where were you looking for these opportunities, and where did this one ultimately come from?
So I was doing a couple different things. So one, I was building relationships with brokers, both local, and then once I had honed in on accounting firms, with accounting brokers. Now there are basically like two buckets of accounting firm brokers: ones that would not speak to me because I wasn't a CPA, and ones that were like, "Cool, that's fun that you're doing this. I'll help you." That second list was a lot shorter, and so I also was doing just my own outreach. And so I use like, a database, and I put together some email cadences, and I made them 6 months long because nobody just makes a snap decision to sell their business. I mean, it takes time for them to even consider it, right? So I just wanted to be in their inbox every once in a while over the long term and see what opportunities came up.
That makes a lot of sense. I totally agree. The 6 month cadence, it's catching people at the
Yeah.
right time. And I think if you just stop at a month, like that doesn't nearly
Yeah.
capture anything. And that makes sense that you come from a marketing background and could set
Yeah.
all of this up yourself. So that's great. No, that's super interesting. And how did you, I guess, get comfortable with the idea of buying an accounting firm where you're not a CPA? Did you actually hone in only on accounting firms at some point, or were you still
Yeah.
like you had a couple?
No, I originally thought I wanted to buy a marketing agency, right?
Makes
And
sense.
then I actually had talked to a guy. I was trying to write the LOI up. I mean, we were getting serious, so to speak. And I remember sitting in the hot tub with my husband, and I was like, oh, my stomach hurts. I just don't even want to send this. I don't know why. And we started talking through it. And then I realized that if I bought a marketing firm, I would never have time freedom because I know how to do marketing. And so I would constantly get sucked into the demands of the business. And it was kind of a revelation for me. And, thinking about accounting, it's like, I know just enough to be dangerous. And I also, as a small business owner now, I am my client's avatar as well. And so, in some ways, it's actually easier for me because I can't do the work even when everything hits the fan. I have to plan for that. Like I'm not going to be doing somebody's tax return. It wouldn't even be responsible. But second, that I can speak to our prospects and clients the way they think about this kind of work and not the way our accountants think about it from the back end. And so yeah, it's a little bit unusual. But and I'll tell you a story actually. I was reaching out to lenders, to get an SBA loan, and one of them originally was interested in speak to me, and then they had a committee meeting, and he called me back and said, we don't want to move forward with this because you're not an accountant. And I just said to him, I really don't understand that because I work in corporate America and I could manage a team of engineers, and I'm not, but without being an engineer, like every CEO in corporate America, they can't have possibly run every single function. Usually they come from sales or finance,
Yeah,
they're
no,
not running product. I mean, so you know what I'm saying? And you know this too in startups, like I mean, being able to do the work is not the key to running a successful business. And so, like I said, this is turning the accounting industry on its head because it's built on the partner model, just like law firms. But if you think about it, like the way you would build a normal business and not, a partner model, this is how you would do it. You'd put somebody at the top to run everything. You'd have somebody doing operations, HR, IT, and then the production work, the production and fulfillment.
and were you, no, I'm super interested in the partner model because I think that's one of the biggest reasons a lot of people are kind of worried about buying an accounting firm when there are a couple partners that own all the relationships. Did you find a firm that happened to not be set up that way already, or did you just have a plan to kind of convert and make sure you sort of still retain customers?
That's always tricky. But there's a couple things about that. So, one of the patterns I noticed was if there was a firm for like, let's say $500,000 or less price wise, it's almost a guarantee that there's one guy who does all the work, owns all the relationships, and then he's got maybe like an admin or a part-time seasonal person to help him. And then he makes bank in terms of profit margin because he does all the work himself, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and you see these advertising, they're like 60% net margins, and you're like, yeah, it's one guy doing the work.
Yeah.
So I learned to stay away from those, right? This is another reason I was attracted to something that was bigger than one person that had a team in place, is because at some point the managing partner or whoever's at the top or the people at the top, they can't own every single relationship. So that does mitigate some of the risk. The other thing I know is that in the accounting industry, you can count on at least 10% of people to churn after an acquisition. If it's really bad, it could be like 25. Sometimes the acquiring firm or person will cause the churn because the seller was charging too little and they raised prices to be market rate. Um, but but yeah, this particular firm that I bought, the managing partner was not involved in all of the client relationships. And that's not to say he didn't have some of them and it wasn't rocky at times getting those transitioned. But you know, I want to build something bigger than myself owning every client relationship too. So
Right.
I really empower my team to own those relationships and communications with the client and you know, just take that kind of initiative instead of keeping it all here because I don't trust anyone.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess at what size do you generally see? You mentioned kind of like 500K or less. I'm assuming maybe that's purchase price, right? I don't know, SDE. At what size are you sort of seeing these opportunities in accounting firms where there is more of a team in place?
So accounting is weird. It's not an SDE multiple, it's a revenue multiple, which makes no sense in my opinion, because that says nothing about the efficiency and profitability of the firm. But I think historically in accounting, you know, if somebody or another firm is acquiring, they're like, well, we know what we can do. So, you know, if we put them on our model, then we can do X, Y, Z. So they just do it off of revenue. And it's typically like the sort of starting point is 1x of revenue. And then it can go up to like 1.2 or maybe even 1.5 if it's a really hot industry or if it's remote. And then if it's not so much of that, it'll go less, you know, like 0.8, 0.9. But yeah,
Interesting.
I think a million would be this. So I would look at a tuck-in that was maybe 750K or so. I wouldn't look at anything smaller than that because you just go back to the one guy problem. And also just, you know, bringing in a firm into your culture and integrating the team and the clients is a lot of work. And I'm not going to do that for less than 750K in revenue. But
That no, that
I think a million is kind of where it starts to, you have a real team versus a guy and a few
yeah.
assistants. And then it just grows from there. And then probably, you know, once you get to 5 million is where it's really good because that's where, you can have a leadership team and not just managers and you.
No, that makes sense. I'm so interested, that conversation you mentioned, the bank had with you where they were like, you can't run this firm because you're not a CPA or not an accountant. What ended up happening there? How did you end up finding a lender that was like, you could do this, no worries?
Well, the end of that story is that I found a different lender and then this lender came back and offered me better terms and I ended up going with them after all.
That's hilarious. And what convinced them in the end?
I guess because other people were willing to do it and it was a good deal for them. So I guess they decided to get over their scruples. And the other thing is you can't tell just if somebody's a CPA, that doesn't mean they're going to be a good business person either.
Yeah.
Right. And me, I came from corporate America. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be a good business person either. It's all a little bit of a crapshoot. And I guess if I were in the lending industry, I would be asking them for more details on the financial forecast and their plans for growth and things like that. I'm not sure how much of that stuff I prepared that they read, but That's how I would vet people because, you know, 82% of small businesses fail because of poor cash flow management.
I
So
like that.
I'd be looking for somebody who knows how to manage their cash flow.
No, that makes sense. And really quick, I think a lot of people still don't know how someone who's not an accountant or not a CPA can even buy one of these firms. Can you just talk about that a little bit and maybe the nuances there?
So I will say that I have taken a lot of calls from people in the last year and a half who are in some position like mine, and they're like, I too want to buy an accounting firm. I think it's like the secret has come out and people have figured out that it's a hot industry and PE's coming out. I probably get like 6 or 8 PE inquiries a week, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, but so like I said, there's kind of two buckets of brokers, like those that will talk to you and those that won't. And same with firm owners. There's a lot of firm owners who would not speak to me because I wasn't an accountant. And so I quickly learned that I didn't want to speak to them either because they wouldn't be a right fit for me either, right?
Love
And
that.
so the ones who were interested in talking to me and open to that idea, I knew had a different kind of firm, the kind that I was looking to build off of. And so yeah, so I was doing all this outreach. The one I ended up buying actually did come through a broker. I came across it in October of, I'm gonna forget this. I think it was October of 22. And then I didn't really do anything about it other than a quick initial conversation with the broker. And then in late January of 23, I picked it back up and I'm like, oh, this thing is still on the market. And I talked to the broker and he said, yeah, we had a couple offers and it just was like a lot of these offers from these bigger firms are like, yeah, we'll fold you in and then you can work for us. And not every owner wants that. They want more of an exit, right? So he was interested in my background and my ability to allow him to fully exit when he was ready.
That makes sense. And I guess just legally speaking, are there any sort of restrictions on non-CPAs owning an accounting firm?
Yes. Two things I would note. So the first one is if you are not a CPA, you can't do any attestation or audit work, which this firm didn't anyway. The way to get around that, if you're looking at a firm and you're really interested in it, a lot of CPAs know that buyers don't want that kind of work anyway, and they'll offer to carve it out, or you can say that you need to carve it out. Like, I just will not take that on. So that's the first thing. And then the second piece is every state has different rules about the use of CPA and accounting and stuff like that. But for sure, if I boil down for me, it was, I'm in Tennessee. The firm I ended up buying was in North Carolina. I might acquire other regional firms. And so I just want to make sure I follow all the rules. So, the firm was named, the seller's named CPA, right? So in certain states like Florida and Tennessee, you can't use the word accounting in your name if you're not a certified public accountant. So I just called our firm Red Bike Advisors, and it doesn't matter what state we're in, we'll be compliant. And I really don't want to run afoul of the CPA board, even if I don't agree with everything with them, because I do have CPAs on my team and they worked hard to get those licenses and they value them. And I would never do anything to jeopardize anything for them.
So you changed the name of the firm after you acquired it then?
Total rebrand. But I'm in marketing, so that wasn't too bad.
Got it. And did you always know you were kind of open to a business that was maybe out of state? I mean, you mentioned you're in Tennessee, the firm's in North Carolina. How'd you kind of think about that?
Um, I've been working remote since before it was cool, so I'm super comfortable and I've run global remote teams. So to me, if you find the right kind of person and position it the right way, it's not really a big deal. The firm already had, I think after COVID, they kind of went through the change everybody else went through. And I've told this story before, but the day that I acquired the firm, we were at the bank signing the papers, and then we went over to the office and he had asked everybody to come in for lunch and a meeting. And there was kind of word on the street, like, is he going to make us come back to the office full time? Because if he does that, I'm going to quit, Um, and so instead, he just announced an acquisition by somebody who didn't even live in the state. And they're all like, okay, that's big news, but at least we don't have to come back to the office.
That's hilarious. And how did everyone take, and not to jump ahead, but how did everyone take it?
Um, it was surprising. So, this is very hard because this is a very people-centered business, both on the employee side and then also on the client side. And so, we if you don't try to take a lot of care in passing those relationships on, it's going to be difficult. Um, for us, I think that it went pretty well, overall, the first 6 months. The big thing that happened for us was, one of the partners that I bought the firm from, she had always planned to leave public accounting, but she, as part, and here, me and my naivety, not realizing how hard it is to find tax managers in this market. I'm like, cool, I'll start hiring as soon as, and she gave me 6 months. But we had a really hard time recruiting for that role. It's a very specialized role that is highly competitive. And so by the time we found somebody, it was coinciding with the end of her contract, and there wasn't really a lot of overlap, and it caused the rest of the team just to feel like, what am I doing here? So we lost quite a few of the tax team during tax season this year, which was
Wow.
so everything was smooth sailing the first 6 months, and I guess I got a little complacent. And then that's when everything hit the fan and it got really hard. So I definitely have some lessons from that. But and this is why I think that, if and when I would like to do more acquisitions, but I have become a lot more picky in what I'm looking at, because it absolutely has to be a culture that integrates with ours, both from the employee and the client side, because otherwise I already know from hard experience how it goes if you get that part wrong.
No, that makes sense. And, going back a little bit pre sort of close, you mentioned that the name of the firm was like seller's name CPA. How did you structure the deal, I guess, with the seller, both financially as well as some of the things around transition and kind of de-risking yourself from him just, walking up and leaving?
Um, the first thing I'll say is I really had a high level of trust in him and vice versa. And I do think that's important. If I learned pretty quickly on that if I sat down with somebody who I could tell they didn't jive with my values and the way I approach things with my level of integrity, that it was not going to be a good fit. Because if you see that up front in a 30-minute Zoom meeting, then those issues will just continue to domino effect during your entire relationship. So I would say the seller and I were very much on the same page, and we had a high level of trust, and that was a big thing. He's somebody that I knew would follow through regardless of whatever happened. But we still live in the real world, so um, so the SBA doesn't like the seller to stay on for a long time. So we had him stay. We had a contract for 9 months, I think. And then we kind of looked at things, and he's actually still with us on a part-time basis. And like I said, high level of trust. We get along really well. He does our virtual CFO work. But yeah, you can't call it an earnout. Again, and I think the SBA is kind of changing some of their rules around this. I've heard that recently, but back then you couldn't call it an earnout, but it's a pretty common structure, right, to protect your revenue. And so we had a clause that basically said, we have to earn this much revenue in the 12 months following the close of the sale. And anything that's short of that will be a dollar for dollar reduction in the note that I owe to him.
That's great. And did you feel like that helped? I mean, you already trusted the seller.
Yeah.
But what kind of impact did you feel from like a churn perspective? I know you mentioned sometimes it's caused from just raising prices.
Yeah.
But what was that like? Did you feel like that actually panned out sort of, well for you?
So I bought the firm right after tax season, right? So a lot of the big activity had already taken place. And so we didn't see a lot of churn like those 6 months. And what I've noticed in this industry is people make their moves in January, right? So that was when we were doing all the renewals. And so that's really where I saw some of it. And I will say that he was instrumental in, and I was like 6 months in. And so it was all like a big new learning experience for me. And he voluntarily took on a bunch of our, what I would call key renewals, right? Like the big ones that he had relationships with. And he accomplished those for me. And he gave me time to get to know those people. And Yeah, so that was a big thing he did. It was obviously beneficial to him too because it helped protect that revenue, but it was huge for me because, for me it's like, when you buy a business, you're not you either have investors, you've put a lot of your own cash in, or you have a loan or some combination of all three of those. And so there's more pressure than when you build a business from scratch and you're just like, if something goes wrong, well, your profit margin isn't as good. Like you have to think about that stuff that comes off the bottom, like the loan payment and, account for all of that and make sure that that still works for the cash flow.
How did that conversation actually go? I'm always curious how that conversation when he's like, I'm out, but also you should stay with the business. Like, how did that actually happen?
You mean with the seller?
Yeah, with the seller on those renewals, the important sort of the key renewals that you were talking
Oh,
about.
I mean, I think I was really lucky that he was actually still staying on in a virtual CFO director of advisory services capacity. And so he had some relationships with some of these people anyway in that capacity. And so it just I think the way we did it was pretty seamless, right? Now, that's not to say there weren't some people that said, well, I mean, and it's funny too, because some of the things people said when they left, like, Adam Shea never raised my prices this high. And I'd be like, hey, have you ever, and he'd be like, we raise our prices every year. It's like, this is the first time they noticed because there was a transition. And so there's some stuff like that we had to deal with, because on the client side, and definitely clients that, if I mean, honestly, I don't know if I'd do anything differently. But when I look back over the impact of some of the changes I made, some of them were hard on clients and the team, and I'm especially talking about introducing new technology. You think that that's going to improve everybody's lives, but people do not like change. So if you look at a client who's been around, 5, 10 years, then all of a sudden you change their client portal on them, they're not happy about that. But you bring new people on and they're like, cool, you have a client portal and it's secure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I guess going back to, you spoke about sort of financing a little bit about with the SBA. How did you finance the deal? Was it just SBA and your own down payment? Did you bring on investors? How did that kind of work?
Yeah, I put a down payment down. I have a note with the seller and then the SBA had the rest. Yeah.
And
So pretty simple
how did you get
structure.
comfortable with, going down the SBA path? And, I think a lot of people think through, I have to take on a personal guarantee for this loan. How did you kind of get comfortable with that?
Um, I so I think that you have to look at the risk versus the reward, right? And I think in the case of accounting firms, I mean, overall, they're very stable businesses with recurring revenue. It's not like we're talking about, something that you have to go and kill your food every time you want to eat, or something that is like a pop-up shop type thing that is the flavor of the moment, right? I mean, these are accounting firms. They're like so stable. That's why everybody wants one. So that helped. That definitely helped. And then I'm not gonna lie to you, there were times when I was like, you know, I think that what I did to combat that was I looked at the numbers constantly. I mean, I still do, but I did a cash flow forecast like a couple times a month. And I mean, and it's in this business, like a lot of the cash comes in right away in January, but then you just really have no idea what's happening. And it takes a year plus to really understand the rhythm of your business and the finances. So I dove into that and I prioritized that. And so I was constantly running that. And, I have this little thing like, this is the moment when I run out of cash if we don't grow or if this doesn't change or whatever. And, we've been doing great and it hasn't been an issue.
That's great. And just going back, to kind of, we talked about the SBA process, but how did you diligence the opportunity? Obviously not coming from the industry, what did you
Yeah.
do to diligence the deal? And how long did it take, I guess, from when you went under LOI to close? And were there any, I guess, challenges that kind of arose during that process?
So due diligence. So this is actually funny, but our firm, we have a forensic accounting department, and we actually do due diligence for other people.
That's funny.
But obviously, I could not ask, the firm I was buying to do its own due diligence. Total conflict of interest. So I used a different firm to do that. Um, he told me that the guy I worked with, he said accounting firms either like they're like the cobbler's kids who go barefoot, or they have super buttoned up, super clean financials. And he's like, your guy is super buttoned up. I was like, cool. So he had a high degree of confidence in the financials. Let's see. It took us a little bit longer to close. So I think we had the LOI signed in sometime in February, and we ended up not closing until mid-June. So it was about 4 months, and it could have been a lot quicker than that, but a couple things got in the way. Number one, tax season is super busy time. And so he was like burning the candle at both ends, trying to, work through this process with me and then also assist on the tax side. And then the second piece is we had a little hang up with his landlord did not want me to assume the lease, and the bank wouldn't move forward without that piece of paper. And so we ended up doing some creative stuff there to get the bank to agree to it and that fit within the terms of the existing lease. And then we were able to move forward. And so we ended up, a little bit past out of tax season.
Got it. Now I feel like the lease is a very common holdup, so I'm glad you guys sort of figured that one out.
Yeah.
I guess when you guys did actually close, you mentioned sort of, I guess, what did the first sort of 90 days look like? Kind of, mentioned that first meeting with everyone, but yeah, what were you focused on in those initial days, especially because you were doing this remotely?
Yeah. So I traveled to Wilmington and stayed there for like a week, that first week. And I think the first couple days were things that I didn't anticipate, because in my head, the priority was I'm going to go in here and I'm going to earn the team's trust. I'm going to have one-on-ones with everyone. I'm going to get to know everyone. I'm going to start calling on clients, getting to know them. Like that was my big priority, was clients and team. And then the other kind of big thing was the rebrand and getting that all out there to the community, basically. Um, but and it's like what I planned and what really happened. And so what really happened that first week is I was like neck deep in setting up payroll and having everybody re-sign their contracts. And we found out that there was a certain set of contracts that he had that did not have an assignable clause to them. So we had to have all the clients re-sign those. And so it ended up just being a lot of paperwork. And I would be there all day in the office, and then I'd go back to my Airbnb and like work till 10 p.m., like trying to get I-9 forms out and, stuff that I did not anticipate. And when I said, oh, I want to be the CEO and not have to do all my own work, I want people for that. Well, small business ownership is nothing like being a director in corporate America. I do a lot of my own work.
Yeah, I bet. And then what happened afterwards? At what point did you get past this initial sort of like paperwork phase and
Yeah.
actually get to, what your priorities were originally?
Yeah, I think, that those first 90 days, my goals were smooth transition for all the clients, all the team, and do that, not just the website rebrand, but kind of within the Wilmington community, which is where the seller had really built his reputation. And so that was a big focus. And then, I did my listening tour. And so I heard from clients, oh, we don't like the portal. It's a pain to use. I heard that a lot. I heard, this breaks, that breaks, stuff about the software. And so I started to think like, what, because in an accounting firm, you can't make changes during tax season. So it's like, I have this little window of time and I have to decide if I'm going to make some changes now or not. And I did make quite a few tech changes. So like I said,
How'd that go? I guess how'd that go with maybe the team and then the clients? I'm curious.
yeah, the team did not like the changes. Accountants really don't like change. And so I had to really sell it to them. I think, like I said, I don't know that I'd do anything different, because we did need to put a little bit more of a modern spin on the tech stack.
Yeah.
And
But they eventually, I'm guessing, sort of just figured it out and
eventually it
learned
becomes your
it.
status quo, and then it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the big thing was, I spent Thanksgiving weekend, that first November, like transferring files to our new CRM.
Oh,
So,
and were clients happy though?
um, some of them, it was a mix. Some of them liked it, and some of them were like, what happened to my old folders? And, I mean, clients don't like change either. And the thing about that I always say to them is when they go, well, I might go to a different firm, I don't like all this change. Well, you're going to have a completely new person and processes there too. So give us a chance. Like, let's see if we like each other. So I did try that a few times when somebody said they're leaving because of the transition or the acquisition.
Oh wow, that's no, that's crazy. And what happened afterwards? Like you spoke about raising prices. Did you do that pretty quickly too? What were some of the other changes you started implementing?
So I didn't come in and raise prices. I think a lot of people have to do that when they buy an accounting firm because some guy is churning out 1040s for like 500 bucks a pop. And I mean, even Intuit, an H&R Block charge more than that. So, you can't make a living off of that unless you're doing it in bulk and then you're not doing complex work or a good job. But so I think the seller's prices were pretty good. What I did was we were really heavy on the tax side. And a much smaller percentage of our revenue was accounting. And I wanted to offer accounting first, build on that with tax strategy and tax compliance, and then build on that with advisory. And so that's kind of what I did. And when you do that, you end up like doubling your revenue basically per client, because when you're doing monthly accounting, it's an ongoing relationship every month. And so we call it the business owner's breakthrough package. And it's, we call it done for you, accounting, tax, and advisory. And so they just pay a flat fee every month, but they get all that stuff. And then we say, we're your year-round partner. We're not just here for you once or twice a year for your taxes, right? Like we want to help you succeed as a small business and grow. So I think that was the biggest change that I've been making and I'm still making. And we're slowly starting to shift the balance of the revenue. So we've got less tax only and we're starting to get more accounting and tax clients, which is actually awesome for our tax team too, because the books are always clean when we do them.
That's funny. With it makes sense just from like the seasonality of a tax heavy firm, but um were you able to successfully, I guess, upsell some of those existing tax folks into accounting, or is it mostly new clients you're bringing in where you're kind of bringing them into the full package?
Yeah, I thought we'd have a lot more opportunity with existing clients. But the history was that previously this firm didn't even have accounting and they had just started maybe a couple of years before. And so they had actually referred people out over the years to other bookkeepers. And so when I said, hey, you should do your bookkeeping with us, they'd be like, are you kidding me? You guys referred me to so-and-so like 6 years ago. So we have converted a couple, but it's mostly been just the new people we're bringing on that we're bringing onto this bundled services package. Yeah.
And are you at the point where, it's been a year and a half, are you now focused sort of more on growth? Now, you've obviously made a lot of changes in the business, but you're a marketer. Have you been focused on growth? Have you been sort of successful in bringing on new clients?
Yeah. So I thought the first 6 months would be transition, and then I was going to hit the ground running last January, a year ago, with growth. What ended up happening is losing tax team members. I ended up going headfirst into production. Not that I was doing tax returns, but I was doing like client communications and I'm trying to help organize paperwork and do anything I could to help the tax team along. And so I feel like that kind of set me back, and then, but then the last 6 months or so, I've been reinvesting into marketing. Also we do tax resolution, like for people who get notices and audits and don't file their returns. And then we do fraud and forensic accounting as well. So I've been focusing on marketing all three of those buckets. And this year, I've accomplished my goal with the website, the rebrand. And so this year now we're just kicking off a rebrand of the website to make it more lead gen focused. I think everybody knows that we're Red Bike Advisors now. So now it's time to, bring it down funnel a little bit and
Yeah.
focus more on lead gen. Yeah.
It's great. And where do you hope to be, like revenue split wise between across sort of like the different services? Like, what's your sort of dream state, and where are you guys at now?
Yeah. So right now, I think tax is about 55%, accounting is about 15, and then the balance goes to our fraud and forensic team and our tax resolution. So I think those are in a pretty good place, and we can continue to sort of organically grow those. The thing about those two departments is the people that work in them are super specialized and credentialed, and so it's a lot harder to find them. I mean, I said it's hard to find a tax manager, but you can find a lot. Tax preparers and bookkeepers are a lot easier to hire than forensic accountants. So if I think about the opportunity versus the cost of the opportunity, I think that, growing these, like investing, marketing dollars into growing these proactive services is where I'm focused right now.
That makes sense. And what does the team look like? What's your, you spoke about what you're focusing on, but what does your day-to-day role actually look like these days?
Yeah. So it's really nice. So I have a leadership team. So, my departmental leaders who manage their own departments. So, but I think of myself as like, part of the admin team in a way. Like, part of my job is to make sure that their jobs are easier, right? And that they have all the tools they need to do their work. But that sounds really pie in the sky. I mean, the reality is I'm just like everyone else wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
I get to work and I'm like, I am going to redo the sales communications flow this morning. I'm not even looking at my email, and then all of a sudden everything blows up, and like, an hour later.
Life of a business owner.
Yeah, what was I doing again? Yeah. But I do, I'm actually in the process of hiring an executive and marketing assistant right now. I read Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time over Christmas break, and it really struck me that I don't want to become somebody who hates my own business.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get some help with some of my email and marketing outreach.
That makes sense. And I'm curious with you spoke a little bit about tuck-in acquisitions earlier on, maybe even acquiring other firms. Is that still on the radar? Sort of when you bought this business, was the plan always like you're going to buy it, you're going to keep running it? You even mentioned you're getting reached out to by private equity firms, multiple times a week. What's your sort of, do you have like an end game here that you're shooting for, or just kind of, doing this for the cash flow?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So I when I first started this, and probably a lot of people who listen to this think that they're going to do the same thing. I'm like, I am going to have a holding company, and I'm going to acquire, and I'm going to work above the business, and I'm going to be an investor, and somebody's going to run my stuff. But I heard somebody say once that you should run your own business for at least 2 years. Otherwise you have no clue what's going on and you can't hold people accountable properly. And especially if you're coming into a brand new industry. So, I'm happy with where I'm at right now, but I don't want to be neck deep in the weeds on every single thing, in perpetuity. I always think about things in decades, like my 10-year plan, right? So, 10 years after buying this firm, I want to grow it to 10 to 20 million. I know that's a big range, but it really depends on acquisitions. You can grow organically in that amount of time as well, but I would like to make more acquisitions to speed that along. But like I said, I have to be really picky about what they are. And so I'm really, if I read listings almost every day, but if I see something that's like, it's 85% tax, I don't want it. I don't, my team doesn't want it. There's no work-life balance in that. I want bookkeeping and tax because the year is much more like this than like this.
And what else are you now that you're actually operating the business, what else are you looking for as you're thinking about additional acquisitions in the same space?
Yeah, so you definitely get a lot more pickier, right? I mean, if I were doing a holding company, I was like rolling plumbing firms underneath, I might be able to get away with having really disparate stuff, but eventually you want some some efficiencies of scale in using the same software and the same, admin team and all that stuff. So I think that, the software is so important, right? So we're a QuickBooks shop. I am open to adding Xero, but not at the current time with my current team because they don't know Xero. So if I came across an acquisition and they were a Xero shop and the people were going to stay and we could get those clients, then we'd have two softwares we could offer, which is more opportunity because sometimes we turn people away because they won't switch to QuickBooks. So, I'd be open to that. Or, if they, on the other hand, on the tax side, our tax software has to match up because we're not doing tax returns in two systems.
Right. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So it's kind of that, but it's also going to be culture, right? I want everybody to feel like, that they're behind our mission of helping small business owners run sustainable, profitable businesses. I want everyone to get up and go to work and feel really good about that and not just like, I'm doing my tax accounting job.
No, that makes sense. And for those listening, are there specific industries that you guys work with? Is it all small businesses? Do you guys kind of have any niches? What does that look like?
Yeah, we're both generalist and specialist. I'd say under 500K in revenue is probably not a good fit. Our sweet spot's kind of about 1 million to 5 million. We can go above that and a little below that, but anything below that, the cost for us to provide the services is really too high as a percentage of revenue. And I think that person or business should really focus on growth first.
Yeah.
And then in terms of industries, we do a lot of dental, medical, and chiropractic, and those are kind of our sweet spot. We know the industry really well. We know the pain points of running those kinds of practices and the KPIs associated with them. But we have a lot of, we have some really interesting clients in all kinds of industries that you've probably never heard of, and that's what makes it fun too.
I love that. And I wouldn't have expected dental, medical, and chiropractic, but good to know for those listening. I know we're almost at time, so Gretchen, don't be sensitive. Any sort of final words of wisdom, especially for those first-time business buyers out there who are listening to this, maybe where you were 2 years ago, let's say. What do you have to
Yeah.
say to them?
Um, I think that the biggest thing I'd say is that this is probably the biggest purchase you're going to make, including your house, if you pull the trigger on this. And so make sure that you have, don't skimp on the due diligence, don't skimp on the attorneys. Um, make sure you're getting what you need and make it a win-win between you and the seller if you possibly can. You don't want this to be contentious. These are people, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's it. It's a big step into the unknown, and it can feel really like I've definitely had moments, and I know other people have too that I've talked to, and we actually work with a lot of people that have acquired businesses, but where they're like, oh my gosh, I was just on the floor curled in a ball wondering what have I done. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's going to be the wildest and most satisfying roller coaster of your life.
I love that. And I love how, despite all the challenges and you've still remained sort of very enthusiastic about the whole acquisition space and becoming a business owner. And, a lot of people dream about it, but then when they're on this other side, they're like, is this the right decision? But I'm glad you're happy about yours.
Yeah.
Last question, Gretchen. If people want to reach out, where can they find you? What's the best place to find and reach you?
Yeah, so you can find our website at redbikeadvisors.com. It's with an O, but if you spell it with an E, it'll still come to the right
Love
spot. I
that.
got both domains.
Brilliant. Love it.
Yeah, and you can reach me on LinkedIn as well. I will admit that I don't check my LinkedIn messages as often as I should, but the free strategy session forum on our website that goes directly to me. So
Amazing. Well, Gretchen, thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot. Really excited to see where this journey continues to progress for you. Love speaking to other female entrepreneurs. As I said, you're the second person I've interviewed who's a woman who's acquired a business, which is crazy because I've interviewed over 50 people in the past year. So thank you for doing this. And yeah, I'll be following along.
all right. Thank you so much, Helen. I appreciate the opportunity.